we are living through a period of global instability.
Bad news it always sells much better than good news.
Lots of people are talking about this Nordic model.
Different geopolitical interests.
Through the prism of Russia or through prism of China.
The respect of the other countries' territorial integrity and national sovereignty.
Both their strengths and blind spots.
Solving internal conflicts.
Blueprint for Central Asian case.
The regional identity does not compete with the national identity.
Building trust at a political level. Hello everyone, welcome back to CPR Podcast. Today we are joined by Professor Johan Streng, one of the leading voices in Nordic cooperation and political thought. Professor Streng is professor at the Center for Nordic Studies at the University of Helsinki, with over dozens of academic publications, years of experience advising government, and strong presence in both policy debates and media. What makes Professor Streng particularly interesting is his ability to link philosophical thoughts with practical realities of regional politics. He's also been deeply engaged with Nordic institutions like the Nordic Council of Ministers, and various cultural foundations. So, Professor Streng, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
Before we dive into Central Asia, Northern Europe idea, I would like to start by exploring your journey. So what brought you to research on Nordic Council? Can you talk a little bit about your...
The really kind of practical reason was that I had just finished my PhD and was looking for a job, and then I was commissioned to write a report on Nordic cooperation by the Nordic Council, their yearbook, which was published in 2012. So that's basically just the practical reason, and then suddenly I became an expert on Nordic cooperation because I had to do some reading and interviews and so forth. But more academically, I've always been interested in Nordic politics and the Nordic societies in general. I've lived in. I'm from Finland, but I've lived in Denmark and Norway and Sweden, so I have a quite broad perspective on the region and their similarities and differences in their political cultures and how they communicate well and sometimes not so well.
So let's move to interregional cooperation in a shifting dynamics. So we are living through a period of global instability, right? Like many regions are rethinking their partnership, not just for trade, but as a form of security or resilience. We can see similar trends in Central Asia as well. So the idea of this Central Asia, Northern Europe format seems to fit in this trend. From your perspective, is this kind of framework both realistic or relevant right now? If so, what might be actually look like in practice this cooperation?
Yeah, so I think that you're perfectly right in that the international cooperation in general is in some form of crisis, or at least heavily challenged by a return of power politics and so forth. And we see it in many different regions in the world that nations are turning to their closest allies and their closest friends and trying to develop regional cooperation. And even though Nordic cooperation has a very long history that goes back to the 19th century and so forth, I think that the Nordic countries have started cooperating with each other in a much more serious way in recent years. So in that sense, I see that like Central Asian integration and Nordic integration are kind of that we're integrating in each our own corner of the world is symptom of similar processes. But then there's when it comes to the cooperation between different regional between different regions, that's always been quite challenging, because regions tend to be occupied. They tend to have enough to do just to integrate among themselves, and to the extent that they can develop similar kind of or a joint or a shared relation towards external partners, it's usually about developing shared policies towards great powers. So in the Nordic countries, we've had experiences of the Nordic prime ministers having joint meeting with the German chancellor or with the American president or these kinds of things. But meeting with other regional constellations, that has always been much more challenging because there's so many different interests at play. And to the extent that the Central Asia and Nordic countries could cooperate, I think that that's very important as a counterweight to this turn towards this return towards power politics. But it's super challenging. But I think it's very important.
You said you lived in different countries of Nordic Council, right? Like you're from Finland, but you also lived in Denmark and Sweden and Norway, right? Mm-hmm. So from your perspective, do you see any historical precedents from Nordic cooperation that could serve as a blueprint for Central Asian case?
Yeah.
The reason why I am asking, in recent years, lots of people are talking about this Nordic model and how it could be useful for Central Asian regional consolidation. Some people call regional integration. Even American scholars, they mostly talk about, they try to show this Nordic Council model, ASEAN model, and European model, which is much more institutionalized, which but mostly some people, majority of scholars say that ASEAN or Nordic model could be ideal model for Central Asian case.
Yeah, I think that there are definitely lessons that could be learned from Nordic cooperation, to be sure. But then again, like Nordic cooperation has a very peculiar history. So one way of looking at Nordic cooperation is actually to see it as a failed nation-state project. So I mean, Sweden and Denmark, they used to be arch enemies. They fought each other in 30 wars, which is probably a world record or something like that. But in the 19th century, there was this Scandinavianist movement which strove to unite Denmark and Sweden, but also Norway and Finland and Iceland into a nation. But that never materialized because Sweden and Denmark had different geopolitical interests. So the Swedes were concerned about the Soviet Union or Russia, and Denmark was concerned about Germany. So it never materialized. But what happened was that there was born this kind of regional identity instead during the 19th century, which meant that the Nordic, being a Nordic country became an essential part of being a Swede or being a Finn or a Dane. So, like being Nordic is not in conflict with being a Finn, but it's like an essential part of it. And I think that kind of I think that this idea of a complementary regional identity is probably the most valuable thing, or the thing that the Nordic countries have succeeded with the best. It has also always emphasized kind of cooperation within culture and research and these soft areas, while it has always failed when it comes to economy or trade or defense, because the neighboring countries have often pulled the region apart. So I think But even if, like, for a long period, the Nordic countries had different attachment both to NATO and to the European Union. So still there are Norway and Iceland do not belong to the European Union, and Finland and Sweden have only recently joined NATO. But still there is this super strong regional identity, which is like a basis for fundamental trust between the countries.
Okay, that's interesting. From your perspective, what should be first step for Central Asia? Is it building trust at a political level, or like we should start with softer culture or academic exchange?
I think that you could probably do both things at once. And I also think that, like, respecting international law and solving internal conflicts are really kind of a first step. Also in the Nordic countries, we had a lot of, or not a lot of, but some territorial conflicts, which put some kind of dampen on Nordic cooperation in the early 20th century. For example, the Åland question, which the Åland archipelago is an island between Finland and Sweden, and largely Swedish-speaking, but the League of Nations decided that the Åland Islands should belong to Finland, and Sweden respected that. And then there was a conflict about the eastern parts of Greenland between Norway and Denmark, and the International Court in Hague said that the whole of Greenland belongs to Denmark, and they respected it. So Nordic cooperation builds really fundamentally on, like, the respect of the other country's territorial integrity and national sovereignty, and on that basis we have sought to kind of integrate on a people-to-people level. I think that Nordic cooperation has this background of culture and academia and science. I think that's super important, but this was also a different time. I think that if Nordic cooperation would be built from scratch today, I think that we would start with trade and defense for sure. But it would probably have a different result. It would not be the same.
If we look at the map of Central Asia, we also used to have lots of flashpoints among these borders. There was also, like, cases, for example, between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. But now, like, I think, like, almost all territorial issues solved in Central Asia. For example, I can also, like, show a declaration signed by 3 sides. Fergana Valley was one of the most contested areas in Central Asia. Like, all countries, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, they signed agreement to delimitate these areas. But again, like, of course, like, building any partnership also depends on how each side view the others, right? Both their strengths and blind spots. Central Asia, in this sense, Central Asia made a huge stride in recent years, I guess, like, greater regional unity and more coordinated approaches to security, probably, like, a little bit more, like, collective regional identity, I would say. Like, now people started talking about Central Asians, but I don't know to what extent it's present, because I don't know, I didn't see any academic research on that. From where you sit in Europe, how this transformation is being perceived? Maybe, like, I'll make it more specific. Like, when I was in United States, for example, I was surprised still some American scholars see Central Asia through the prism of Russia or through prism of China. They try to kind of overlook the edges of region. Like, from this perspective, like, how Europeans are perceiving Central Asia and countries and the transformations that's happening on the ground here.
To be frank, I don't think that these developments are very closely followed. I don't think that they're told about in the news or very seldom. Bad news. It always sells much better than good news, and from that perspective, it's probably a good sign that we don't talk that much about Central Asia. You're probably doing very well in that respect. But I do think that Europe, the European countries, I mean, Europe is a region of has become a region of small countries, and I think that the whole of Europe, in many respects, tries to avoid looking upon the world in terms of from a Chinese or a Russian perspective, and tries to support the agency of smaller regional collaborations. So just as the seminar that we have here in Tashkent today, the European Union is present, and people from the Nordic countries is present, and from the OSCE. So I think that it's we are really keen in Europe in supporting regional initiatives around the world, and also the agency of these countries themselves. And in that sense, I think that I hate to sound like a self-promoting European or Nordic citizen, which we have the tendency of sounding arrogant at times, but I do think that we have an important role to play in international politics, just in supporting these kinds of initiatives and seeing these regional cooperation initiatives as allies, as something that we can build upon.
Yeah, here we started talking about this, the idea of strategic autonomy. I think this concept was also very popular among European policymakers, experts, right? I think it was Ursula von der Leyen who first mentioned this idea. In this, in the current situation, I think one of the signs of Central Asia's growing independence or autonomy is also it's aligned kind of with its growing international partners. For example, right now, Central Asia engaging with 11 different Central Asia Plus formats involving like 40 countries and to regional organization. I think that's remarkable diplomatic outreach. But my question is, how significant do you think these platforms are shaping in regions Voice International? Do you see that they can change the way Europe or Nordic countries, but in particular, engage with Central Asia?
That might be. That's a very difficult question to answer, but there is this tendency, both within the European Union and when it comes to the Nordic countries and their cooperation, to try and forge various kind of plus initiatives. So the Nordic countries have since the 90s collaborated closely with the Baltic countries in this NB8 formats or 5+3 formats and so forth. So I think that this way of expanding regional cooperation is certainly very fruitful and important, and I think that it also will bring the Nordic and the Central Asian regions together eventually. At least we have a common interest in countering this turn towards power politics, which we see the great powers opting for today.
Thank you for your insight. But at the same time, if we analyze, for example, the relationship between Central Asia and Europe, we can see like we have EU plus Central Asia format, we have Germany plus Central Asia format. But with France, we don't have format. I think like most French experts say that it's convenient for them to work with Central Asia versus EU Central Asia format. My question is that if we let's say we have a Nordic Council and Central Asia format, do you think it kind of completes communications or engagement partnership with Europe, or it could, or it competes? What do you think? Which format is much better?
I think that will. The usual way we look upon these kinds of things from a Nordic perspective is that Nordic cooperation is about certain things, and European integration is about other things. There are certain things that we do better on a European level, and there are other things that we do better on a Nordic level. And I think that when it comes to the relations to Central Asia, there are probably some issues that the Nordic countries can cooperate directly.
Could you be some more specific, for example?
And others that the European Union is the better format. The problem with Nordic cooperation is that Nordic cooperation, the institutions of Nordic cooperation, the Nordic Council and the Nordic Council of Ministers, they don't have resources when it comes to foreign relations. It's not within their mandate. So from that perspective, I think that a more fruitful way of engaging in kind of institutional cooperation with Europe would be through the European Union. But then when it comes to more personal relationships, or when it comes to forging perhaps trade links between corporations or companies in our regions, I'm certain that you would find interest from the prime ministers in the Nordic countries or something like that.
That's very interesting. So you, Professor Strong, you spent years studying what makes regional cooperation actually work in practice beyond speeches and communiques. Given your experience with a Nordic model, some people say it's one of the most stable and integrated regional framework. From your perspective, what lessons could Central Asia draw from it? Again, like as a region, for example.
Yeah, I mean, the first lesson I already mentioned is that the regional identity does not compete with the national identity. Yeah. They're complementary, and you can actually become stronger in your national identity by having a strong regional identity. That I think is a first and very important lesson. Above that, I think that what the Nordic countries have done, or what they are good at, is integrating not only on the political level, but also like on the level of the leading politicians, but on a broader basis. So you engage also the civil society, of course, and experts and researchers and so forth, but also the bureaucrats, which are often forgotten when it comes to international cooperation. There are scholars who talk about like the Nordic transnational bureaucracy being like one of the significant secrets to why the Nordic countries are so integrated. Because Nordic bureaucrats working in various national ministries, they are invited to annual meetings where they meet each other and they learn to know each other and they start to trust each other. So when a Finnish civil servant who works at the Department of Law, for example, when he stumbles upon a EU directive, like some kind of something from Brussels, or he stumbles upon a domestic problem, he can just phone his Swedish or Norwegian colleague and, have you seen this? How should we solve this situation? We should not do it in separate ways. We should do this in a similar way. And it's in that sense, it's the Nordic cooperation is highly kind of informal, and it's very kind of practical, and it's mundane. It's everyday. It's not foreign policy. It's part of domestic politics.
But at the same time, it shows that Nordic Council is institutionalized, right? Like when there is a problem and there is a certain way of doing that, right? Like according to the like accepted regulations and practices and norms, right? Yeah. But one of the challenges in Central Asia is that this so-called regional mechanism, or this consultative meeting of Central Asian states, are not institutionalized. Like this kind of practice, to a certain extent, is I think it could be challenged. But from again, like considering the fact that this cooperation among 5 countries are not institutionalized, what aspect of Nordic cooperation can be translated into practice in Central Asia from your perspective?
No, it's a very difficult question. I mean, I do think that if you aim at creating a Central Asian Union or some kind of a single market or something like that, I do think that you need to start by creating some kind of permanent or institutionalized organizations for cooperation, and from that perspective, I think that perhaps the Nordic countries and the model of the Nordic Council and the Nordic Council of Ministers could be worth looking at, because it's a much leaner, much less expensive format than going straight for the European Union. So I do think that the institutions have some kind of some form of lessons to look at as well.
I agree with you regarding institutions. I think in case of Central Asia, there's informal institutions, norms, there's regulations, informal regulations, and practice are working quite well, and they are also like it also shows like because of these informal institutions, or because of this agile format of communication, they could I mean, when I say they, I mean 5 Central Asian countries could achieve certain success, but for the sustainability or durability of this cooperation, I think we still need formal institutions. Maybe like we could also learn a lot about this role of institutions and how they operate from a Nordic Council. So Professor Streng, thank you for your time and for your insights. I think this conversation has shown just how much potential there is went to regions with different historical outlook, or different histories look for common ground. And I hope this is just the start of a much broader dialogue between our regions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and I'm certain that the Nordic region has much to learn from the Central Asian region as well. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.